Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, let's dive into the Middlekauff mailbag at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs to get your question here on the podcast. We will start with Corey. With the draft concluded, how do you think Washington will fare this upcoming season? Well, brand new coach, obviously a new GM, and a brand new quarterback, which I think is exciting. You could say if he is a high-end player early on, and I'm not even talking CJ Stroud, I'm just saying he's a good rookie, you should compete to win 8-ish games, I would say. Off the top of my head, I don't have your draft in front of me, but you took the defensive tackle from Illinois that a lot of people thought could have been a first-rounder. Now, you have a defensive tackle who's pretty good on the team in Allen. But there were some, I was listening to some things like, could he get traded? Who knows? Obviously, he would definitely have value on the open market if they traded him during training camp or whatever. I think you also drafted a tight end who a lot of people view as really good. The one thing with Adam Peters is he was around, with the 49ers. They actually missed on a lot of high picks and hit on a lot of like 3rd, 4th, 5th rounders. I mean, some of their better players on the team, Fred Warner, 3rd rounder, George Kittle, 5th rounder, Debo early 2nd, but they've had a lot. Hufanga, who was all pro a couple years ago, he got hurt last year, 6th rounder. So Lenore, who's become a really good player, I think was a 3rd or 4th rounder. So I'd feel pretty good about his eye in the mid rounds. CJ Anderson, who was a running back for the Denver Broncos, who was an undrafted free agent out of Cal, when the Broncos won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. When he retired, he said, if it wasn't for Adam Peters, I might not have been in the NFL. And I definitely wouldn't have had the success I had. So always root for that guy. He's coaching right now in the East Bay, I think in Danville. But Adam Peters is good. Obviously, your immediate success is, Dan Quinn changed that Dallas defense pretty quickly. I would say that Dallas defense has a little more talent than yours. But to me, if the quarterback can just be pretty dynamic, even if you're not the most polished passer immediately. I mean, on college tape, he throws a beautiful deep ball and he's really accurate. But let's just assume going from college to the pros, a little bit of a work in progress. The athleticism should buy him a bunch of plays. Now, he's not as dynamic in the open field as Lamar. I don't think laterally, like making guys miss, but he is really fast. He's got to find a way to avoid those hits. But also, let's look at your division. The Giants are a major question mark. I think it's fair to say the Cowboys aren't quite as talented. And the Eagles should win the division, but they're just going to have a ton of pressure on them. So I think a really good season. If the quarterback looks good and you win 8-9, I'd feel pretty good about where I was at if I was an old Commander fan. Big fan. What's your recommendation for a course in the Scottsdale area for $200 or less? Bachelor party in October. I would go to Whirlwind or Raven. It's Chandler and Phoenix. I would look at those 2 courses. And I don't know about this price point in October, but Weekapow. Type in W-E, Weeko, K-O-P-A. It's like 3 different words. It's like an Indian reservation. 2 courses. Yeah, I don't know how expensive it is in October, but it might be right around there. I'd highly recommend it. Hell, I'd go all Saturday, play 36 holes. Persall definitely feels like a Shanahan-type player. However, I feel the Niners are going to look back in a few years and regret not taking Keon Coleman. Bigger, tougher, able to get up and contest balls. Your thoughts? It's a good point. I think, and I definitely like Keon Coleman. I think he makes a lot more sense with an elite drop back quarterback and in that offense. A guy on any given game could throw it 40, 50 times a game and just throw a bunch of 50-50 balls. It's not really how the 49ers play. In a perfect world with Kyle Shanahan, their running backs have 25 to 30 carries, and they have 25 and under pass attempts. Obviously, that can change on a given game, but I'm saying that's philosophically how they think about their team. When I got Josh Allen, I want him throwing it 45 times a game. More he throws, better chances I have to dominate. This ain't Dak Prescott, where I want to run the game, run the ball, right? Because that's the way he has success. Now, Purdy is better than a lot of people give him credit for, but his coach doesn't scheme that way. He schemes great route runners, get open, and we're going to hit you on 6 or 7 times a game. Brandon Ayuk had a breakout year. He had 78 catches. So in a weird way, I think a guy like Pearsall, who is closer to an Ayuk type route runner, goes over the middle, is much more what they're looking for in their offense than Keon Coleman, who get me a guy outside who can just win in one-on-one spots. Josh will throw it up for you. So I think Keon Coleman's going to be really good. I don't think he would be utilized perfectly with the 49ers. No different than Debo. Like, if you put Debo on a lot of teams, if you put Debo on the Bills, I don't want to say he's be useless because he's a very talented player, but he is perfectly suited to play with this guy. Perfectly suited. Some guys, Shane Steichen, when he changed the offense for Jalen Hurts, it went very seamlessly. And then he left and it started looking a little weird. That's not an apples to apples comparison, but you know what I mean? The scheme for a lot of guys, most guys are not Randy Moss. We're in the peak of my powers. I can play in any scheme, anywhere, doesn't matter. Even though I heard a famous story one time about an assistant coach who was on the Raiders that when they traded for Randy Moss, and that team was terrible. And I don't know if it was a preseason game or it might have been a September game because the Raiders shared the stadium with the A's. And when I used to go to the Raider games, that first month, anyone that's watched football used to see it, would have the infield in the football field. So when you'd get to, I forget the exact yard lines, but somewhere around midfield, the second base, right? There would be dirt. There'd be dirt. It feels very, very archaic. Hard to even, that wasn't that long ago. That was like 6 years ago. Hell, less than that, 3 or 4 years ago. They played with the dirt. Well, I don't know if it was week 1, because I don't know if he played in the preseason, but they called a play, and Randy was supposed to run like a deep in or something over the dirt. And he got close to the dirt, and he just started running around it. And obviously, the quarterback either airmailed him, threw a pick. I don't know the exact result. I just know it was a disaster. They come to the sideline, and they look at Randy, and they go, "What are we doing?" And Randy essentially says, like, "I'm not running the dirt, man. Not doing it." Don't blame him. Like, who wants to get tackled on the dirt? Just funny little Randy Moss story. A couple years later, he's on the Belichick Patriots, and they go scores 500 touchdowns. Cowboys fan here. Love the show. I think Jerry Jones saying this all in means we're all in on Dak and McCarthy and a lot of players we have. If they can't win a couple playoff games, they're gone. Your thoughts? I think that's probably what he really deep down meant without articulating it that way. We're all in this year. And if we don't make our first NFC Championship game in 25 plus years, heads are rolling, starting with the coach and the quarterback. We're not extending the quarterback, and we're definitely not extending the coach. Now, I guess they could, if they extend the quarterback, obviously he's not going anywhere. I would not at this point in time. I'd let it play out. It's not like Dak signing a discount now, so if he has a bunch of success, you feel good about giving him a bunch of money. If he wins you 3 playoff games and you lose in the Super Bowl, which I don't think is going to happen. Hell, I don't even think they're going to win a playoff game. But Jerry, till his dying day, is going to believe this is our year. How about them Cowboys? The 82-game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, John, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm from Montreal, Canada. Big fan of the podcast. I have a technical question for you. I'm a tutor. I sometimes give lessons online, and I find myself being inspired by your natural talent for keeping the conversation flowing smoothly. I was wondering, when you record a podcast, do you proceed from bullet points? Do you take any notes? Or all you do is jump right in and improvise? Any tip would be greatly appreciated. Well, everyone's different. I don't know how other podcasters do it. I write out my show. Not like word for word. I'm just saying, like, I write out topics and I kind of write on a notepad, what I'm going to talk about with the Bears, what I'm going to talk about with Bo Nix, Max and Devontae. Like, just my thoughts. I just write them on paper. And then I just press record and I just talk. But I think writing it out on paper, for me, everyone learns different, helps me just kind of crystallize it in my head, know what I want to say. Again, these are like scribbled bullet notes about Caleb Williams, about Fox charging for Super Bowl commercials, whatever. And just the general point I want to make or what I'm interested in talking about. Or, sometimes if I look down, it'd be for stats and stuff that I had written down that are trying to make my point or whatever I'm talking about. But I think that crystallizes in my head. Now, I'm also kind of sick. I mean, I think about this show all day, every day. So anytime that I have a thought, oh, that would be interesting. That'd be an interesting angle. That'd be cool to talk about. I have a little notepad in my iPhone that I'll jot little notes in, and then I'll transfer that to the paper as I'm getting ready. But, I don't also have a set time when I record this if we're not going live. So like right now it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Had a bunch of stuff to do this morning. Didn't get into the rhythm. I realize like I'm not a morning. If I was a radio host, I would be an afternoon guy, not a morning guy. My brain works better that way. Now I will, if I get up sometimes 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning, I'll just grab a cup of coffee, come to the office, write a bunch of notes or whatever, and then go on with my day, work out, come back and record, usually like after lunch. Because that's when I feel, for the most part, I mean, sometimes my brain never opens up, but that's when I'm the most fluid, is from like 1 to 5 if I'm going to record. It's when I feel I do my best. But yeah, it's just kind of natural. And again, this is one of those things that like you're either kind of a talker or you're not, which ironically, I'm kind of introverted, especially in my older years. I don't really love spending time around other people all the time. Like I'm not some extroverted guy. This is kind of my extroverted moment. Now, I play golf with random people. I do things, but I'm not by any means, but I do like to talk. Always have. I was probably definitely more extroverted when I was younger. Still have it in me. Get a few cocktails. But it's just kind of blend everything about my personality and my brain and try to isolate it here on into a microphone. Mailbag question. Is Joe Thuney a future Hall of Famer? My first reaction is no, without even reading your question. Truthfully, I have no idea what makes a Hall of Fame lineman. He's a 4-time Super Bowl champion. He hasn't had many All-Pro seasons, but has easily been the best offensive lineman in the Chiefs dynasty. Let me look up Joe Thuney's resume here. He's a 4-time Super Bowl champion. I guess maybe he won one with the Pats and then he's won 3 with the Chiefs. Has he really won 4? You're right. Is he not a Hall of Famer? What active lineman do you see having a legitimate case? Guy won 4 Super Bowls? Holy shit, what a career. Guy's made a lot of money too. I mean, the Chiefs signed him to an $80 million contract. He was a 3rd-round pick in 2016. Joe Thuney's lived a pretty good football life. Gets drafted in the middle of the second dynasty, the second half of the dynasty for the Pats. Wins a Super Bowl, I'm sure against the Rams. Probably played on another team that lost a Super Bowl. Joe Thuney's been to a lot of Super Bowls now, thinking about it. What a fascinating career. In New England in 2016. So he lost he won an AFC. Yeah, he lost to the Eagles. He beat the Rams. And then he's been with the Chiefs. The thing with offensive linemen, and he's a very, very good player. Like a high-end, excellent career, high-end starter. He's been franchised. Chiefs gave him $80 million. To me, in a Hall of Fame, offensive lineman is like the best offensive lineman. Like what Jason Kelce was for a long time, what Trent Williams is now, what Jonathan Ogden was. If he did that at quarterback or even a wide receiver, I think the team accolades, which is ironic because it's the ultimate team position, the offensive line, less powerful in your case. So I would say no. But thanks for alerting me on he's been to 2 Super Bowls with the Pats, and he's been to 5 Super Bowls. He's been in the league 9 years. I don't think we talk enough about that. All the guy does is win. Wanted to know, give the Chargers overall in their entire draft. I don't have it up right now. I've talked about the alt pick. No brainer. The only thing I do wonder is offensive linemen are very particular about their feet, and some guys can, this happens with guards and tackles, can only play left or right guard or can only function on the right or left side. Not everyone can go both ways. High-end players. Obviously, your backups, you need a swing guard center and you need a swing tackle. But Lane Johnson, I think it's fair to say, is much more comfortable at right tackle. And maybe he's talked about that before in the past. Trent Williams, left tackle. Now, both those guys, if they had to, could switch. But there's a reason, the left tackle, once you stay, you never move. But historically, if you have a starting left tackle and you draft a right tackle, once that guy either phases out, retires, whatever, you just bump that guy over. Nowadays, because there are so many rushers, the right tackle is very valuable. It's why a lot of teams, look at the Chargers, are putting the emphasis there. My question with Joe Alt is he's never played right tackle. I don't even think he was a lineman in high school. So he's only been a left tackle. Slater, I think, has done both. Now, historically, he'd be like, well, I want to stay at left tackle because you get paid more. Well, look at Lane Johnson, paid a premium. Look at Penei Sewell. He's got $85 million guaranteed. So if you're Slater and you bump to the right side, if you're an all-pro elite player, worst, you're still going to get, $100 million. I don't think, historically, it used to mess with the money. I don't think it does anymore. My guess would be, if I was taking an educated guess, Slater's the right tackle and Alt's the left tackle. Less about one guy's better than the other just because one guy's more comfortable at it than the other. Unless they try all out there and he feels good about it. But if I had to take an educated guess right now, that's what happens. But back to the Chargers draft. McConkey, stud route runner. I like Brandon Rice. I think he's a fascinating player. I thought that was a good get in the transfer portal last year by USC. They drafted a linebacker from Michigan. Well, obviously Jim and his defensive coordinator know that guy well. I'd imagine that guy's going to be a plug-and-play player. Wouldn't shock me if they started. Chargers have kind of struggled at linebacker for a while now. To me, it's going to come down to if the running game is good, which Greg Roman and Harbaugh are good run game guys. Now they have an improved offensive line. And the 2 pass rushers can stay healthy. I think it's less about your immediate. Obviously, McConkey's going to play. But, Brendan Rice, guys, we see guys like that all the time in the practice squad. Who knows? I mean, I like the guy, but if you told me he's a practice squad, I'm not going to be shocked. Can Mack and Bosa give you 90% of the games? Because if they do, then you'd be in pretty good shape because your defensive line will be good. Or all those guys both in the training room and on injured reserve. I think it's less about your draft beside Alt and McConkey and more about those 2 guys. Those 2 guys are the big question marks. Because if they're good, shit, you could be a problem. Jim's just too good. Question. Why haven't owners found a way to take more of the guesswork out of the draft? Particularly as it relates to quarterbacks. For such an important position on the field, which can make or break your organization no matter how well you scout, they seem content to leave much of it to chance and circumstance rather than knowing whether or not the player is even worth investing time and resources into. Take soccer, for example. Most of the premier talent is in a professional setting by age 16. If they're good enough or show promise, they will train with the first team. If they show their promise, they get a chance to play a meaningful game. Depending on how well they do in the game, they'll either get a first team spot or they're done. And it's just a matter of time before they go out there without having to pay millions of dollars for them. I don't understand why teams are content with current evaluation system. It's because college acts as the minor league system for pro football. And it is extremely successful in its own right economically, right? The Big Ten, the SEC are printing cash. The NFL invests $0 into that. So all the money the league is making, whether you got a good quarterback or not, you're like the government 3 years ago, just printing cash. So when you are a team that can't lose money and you don't have to invest in the training of the future employees, college football does that. And let's face it, they give a ton of good players every year. It's going to be a little bit of a crapshoot, but you pay zero into it. And what would change? Like you would just have the access to pull those guys. Like I actually think the system, if I was an owner, I would love the system. Yeah, we miss on a quarterback and it sucks. I'm still having if I'm the owner, you're talking from the owner's perspective. I want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars each into a minor league system, which we'll never make money off of, because like one of the reasons college has a lot of success is 50,000 people a year go to graduate from Ohio State or Michigan or I guess they're going to school there at one time. I don't know what the graduating classes are, but those Big Ten and SEC schools are massive. They have an enormous following, like the NFL. So the business model for that is thriving. Now that's going to change, I guess, as some of the dynamics of the revenue sharing, just it's going to evolve over the next, fast, probably 5 years. But if I was an owner, like, I don't give a fuck. I don't want to pay my own money for something that, one, won't net me any money, and two, like, is not, we still have to pay all the coaches to develop those guys. We know they're not cheap. I actually think it's a pretty good setup. And I think it's the setup why football is dominating. College basketball sucks now. Why? Because everyone's one and done. There's no like brand loyalty. Like the top players leave immediately. So no one watches the regular season. And even the NCAA tournament is pretty random now. Where, and I guess it always has been, but you don't even know the players on the big brands. College football feels like must watch. This year college football, everyone was watching Oregon, Washington, Bama, LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. It was just, they felt like NFL games. It's only going to be bigger this year. Might be a little down actually, because I don't know if the crop of quarterbacks is as good as last year, but that changes. No one thought Bo Nix would be a top 15 pick at this time last year. Nobody was saying Jayden Daniels' name. Michael Penix on a lot of boards, probably a third or fourth round pick. So things change. Now, it does feel like those guys were more established than some of these, like Deion's getting into it on Twitter with like his former players. Everyone's like trying to make it some big symbolic moment. Like I just find it funny. Who even cares? This is all theater, guys. This is all, once you start paying to play, which is what's going on in college football, like everything's on the table. I had a scout tell me last year, he's like, you go into these programs, the coach will tell you, like, I care a little less now about some of these, about certain relationships, because like, hey, we just got you 350 grand. You better get us fucking 70 catches, or else we're gonna have a problem. So it's becoming much more cutthroat. And Deion's a pro guy, and he's treating it like the pros. When you suck, we talk shit. In college, they do too, but they just never publicly do it because of recruiting. Now, recruiting's irrelevant. Can you pay players? So that makes college football, to me, a little more interesting. Now, you could argue last year was a unique setup. Caleb had transferred from Oklahoma. Bo Nix had transferred from Auburn. Jayden had transferred from Arizona State. Penix, like we had all these transfers that just worked. It was like one of the greatest, might be one of the greatest transfer portals we ever see. If you think about it, Penix, Nix, JJ didn't, May didn't, but Jayden, 4 of the 6 guys all transferred. All got drafted high and dominated. Bo Nix and Michael Penix were dominating the Pac-12 at Oregon and Washington. And the country. They were 2 of the better teams in the country the last 2 years. Both of them, I know Washington was in the national championship game, but the difference between Oregon and Washington this year is a coin flip. You talk about 2 of the best 5 teams, transfer portal guys. Caleb was unique because he just went with Lincoln. But Jayden's probably more like what we might get this year, Like you're not really expecting it, and all of a sudden this guy from Kansas State transferred to Florida, and all of a sudden we're talking about him like a top 20 pick. That's going to happen. Because I looked at a way too early 2025 mock draft. Don't hate. I couldn't help but click on it. That's where all the kids on social media say you're just doing this for clicks. That is definitely for clicks, and it fucking worked. I clicked that fast. And then I was reading it like, I haven't heard of this guy. This guy's sweet. Weren't many quarterbacks. I know Dion's tweeting his son's a top 5 pick. I do not believe as of today he would go in the top 5. He definitely wouldn't have gone in the top 5 of this draft. I don't think he would have gone in the top 20. Cowboys probably pick him at 20, whatever they pick, 24. That's where he would have gone, the Cowboys. But he would not have been picked based off last year in the top 20 picks. Zero chance. I've been watching college football long enough. Absolutely none. Doesn't mean he can't become one, but he's got a long way to go. The Georgia kid, Carson Beck. I'd be lying. I feel like I didn't watch that much Georgia last year, beside like highlights of Brock Bowers. But he's definitely an interesting guy. And then we're just going to need some other quarterbacks to figure it out, because last year coming into this season, we kind of knew Drake May, definitely Caleb Williams, and there was just a bunch of other names. It doesn't feel like there's 5 names, which you could also say, like, who's going to need a quarterback next year? The Giants? I mean, a lot of teams have quarterbacks that are going to be on their team for a couple years. So maybe it's less dependent, and maybe it'll be a defensive heavy draft. I don't know. Easiest way to get a guy that follows football to click on your article: week after the draft, 2025 mock first rounder. Boop. Click.